You set my rocks, you set my rocks, you set my rocks.
Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing Vinnie Vincent and the Unreleased third album. Now, if you follow my channel, you know I'm a big Vinnie Vincent Invasion fan. Love the first album, love All Systems Go as well. They both had different vocalists on them, but big fan of those two albums and his guitar playing, and also really appreciate what he did with Kiss as well. So great guitar player, but obviously Vinny has had his issues over the years, and perhaps from what I've heard is not the easiest person to deal with. Now, I don't know though about the 80s, because in the 80s he's fairly productive and he puts out quite a bit of music, with Kiss, working with Kiss, does a lot of songwriting, writes for other people as well. And then of course he has two albums as Vinnie Vincent Invasion. Now, the first one that came out in 1986 has Robert Fleischman on vocals, and the second one, All Systems Go, has Mark Slaughter on vocals. And Mark Slaughter had actually come in quite early on and even appears in the Boys Are Gonna Rock music video, even though it's Robert Fleischman on vocals. But things don't end very well between, I guess, Mark Slaughter, Dana Strum, and Vinnie Vincent, and Mark and Dana go off and form the band Slaughter and have quite a bit of success. They even stay on the same label, Chrysalis. So what ends up happening, almost really, Vinny gets dumped, but they keep Mark Slaughter and Dana Strum, and the band Slaughter have a platinum album with Stick It To You. And there's even a song on there called Burning Bridges, which really is, lyrically sounds like it's about their experience with Vinnie Vincent. So this is the time period around when the Slaughter album comes out that I'm picking up on what was going to be a potential third Vinnie Vincent Invasion album. And interestingly enough, he gets Robert Fleischman to come back. So my understanding is at this point, Robert was sort of a bit like, well, wasn't much else going on. I might as well give it a go. And there's actually a very interesting article from Kerrang, which I'm going to show you. It came out, I think it was December 15, 1990, so just at the end of 1990. And in this issue of Kerrang, Vinnie Vincent is talking to the journalist about his new album, this third album that's actually going to come out on Enigma Records. So I'm just going to read you some of the some parts of that interview. The new 14-track platter, which its writer, lead guitarist, bassist, producer describes as progressive but very heavy, should see the light of day early next year. It's going to pick up where the first Vinnie Vincent Invasion LP left off, he says. But it's got a very interesting cover that I won't tell you about. I hope it gets past the censors. Vinnie has little time for what's been said about him, and even less for making replies. As he would repeat, it's the music that counts. At the moment, probably most of the valets that park cars make more money than I do, he chuckles. A few days later, a rumor emerges he has filed for bankruptcy. There we go. So even back in those days, maybe having some financial issues. And then he's asked, isn't it your fault Robert Fleischman left in the first place? He says, in a way, yes, I had lots of bad advice from a lot of used car salesmen. He was put in a very awkward position by the label. I was at a vulnerable part of my life during the early parts of my solo career, and I was kind of treading water. The Invasion was really a bunch of people I found to try and execute my thing. There was this very, very sleazy guy in the situation. He was the scamming genius of all time, the slick talker, the whole thing, a very destructive influence. When I put my blood and soul into something and it gets tampered with, it's like additives. You either get homemade something or you get chemicals. The public won't know any different and they'll eat it anyway. My tastes are more special, so I won't eat it. I can tell the difference. The record company were bystanders. People were painting me as eccentric artist to the record company and hinting that we should take this into a much more commercial vein. It's too over the top. Well, some might argue it was too over the top, but I liked it. They took control out of my hands. You can't take Robert Fleischman away. That's ridiculous. They were painting Robert to be a villain, and he wasn't. Robert really knew that these people around me were very, very bad. And I know Robert has actually sort of said that some of the people that he hung around with didn't help him. And then I think he's talking about Dana Strum when he talks about one person in the band was the only in it because he was such an incredible talker. I never once heard him play his fucking instrument. He was an incredible name dropper. Anyway, then it ends, dropping me back at the hotel a couple of blocks down Sunset. Vinnie recalls a phone interview we did about 3 years previously. Vinnie Vincent Invasion had just issued All Systems Go, and Vinnie apologizes for bullshitting. I asked if he really despised the LP that much. He said yes, it should have never have been. It should have been called Abort Mission. It was a birth defect. There we go. So he's not a big fan of the second album, which I still like, All Systems Go. But of course, he's talking about this after what has happened. Mark Slaughter's left the band, Dana Strum's left the band, and there's obviously it's not ended in a good way. So I guess it makes sense he's going to talk negatively about that second album and talk up Robert Fleischman a lot more because now he's going to be the singer on this third album. And interesting, he talked about there being 14 tracks because, as I'm going to talk to you very soon, there are a number of tracks that feature Robert on vocals that have not yet been released. So let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at this unreleased third album. What are the songs and who plays on it? So the album was supposed to be called Guitars from Hell, and it was supposed to be the third Vinnie Vincent Invasion album, and it was going to be released on Enigma Records. So you can see the potential songs here. Now, Rocks on Fire, there's 2 different versions of it. So there's a total of 10 songs, and the first song, Genesis, is actually an instrumental. So the second track is Wild Child. Now that ends up on the Euphoria EP that is released in, I think, around 1996. And I'll talk about that a bit later. Then you've got Rocks on Fire. That has not yet been released. Then you've got Euphoria. That was on, of course, Euphoria EP. Get the Lead Out, also on Euphoria EP. Now you can see it's got some rough years and brackets there, roughly when these tracks were recorded. Then you've got an unreleased song, New Kit. Then you've got Shocker, also unreleased. Invincible. Full Shred is on Euphoria. And Truth, also unreleased. So a total of 10 tracks there. 4 of them have been released on the Euphoria EP, and 6 of them have not. Of course, Genesis being an instrumental. So, you've definitely got 5 tracks there that have not yet officially been released. And of course, they all feature Robert Fleischman on vocals. And I'm going to play those 5 songs at the end of this video today. So you'll get to hear those. Remember, they are, though, of course, I guess, not fully produced. They're demos, I would imagine. But all sort of recorded, by the looks of it, looking at these dates, if they're correct, around 1990 or even 89 or 91. So, like I said, Robert Fleischman was on vocals. There's a bit of a mystery, really, about who plays bass. Chris Lee has been mentioned, but Andre LaBelle is the drummer on these demos. Now, interestingly enough, I think when the Euphoria EP comes out in 1996, Vinnie, for whatever reason, replaces Andre's drums with a drum machine, is what I've discovered. But yeah, I think on these demos it is Andre. And there's an interesting quote here from Andre. Now, Andre, from my understanding anyway, was not particularly a well-known drummer at the time. Supposedly he was a friend of, he basically he a friend of Jimmy Page knew Andre and recommended him to Vinnie Vincent. But this is what Andre said. I can't say for sure, but I remember recording with Vinnie on and off between 1989 and 1992 in Los Angeles at Grandmaster Recording Studios. So 89 to 92, that kind of makes sense. Of course, that interview was done in 1991. It's possible he then went and because he was still working on the album, he then went and did some more demos. So 1989 to 1992 in Los Angeles at Grandmaster Recording Studios, Clear Lake Audio, and Cornerstone Studios. The album was to be Revenge. At the time, Vinnie was also writing for Kiss, so we know that he ends up writing 3 songs for Kiss on the Revenge album. Gene Simmons liked the title and convinced Vinnie to let Kiss use it. Vinnie then decided to use the title Guitars from Hell for his own, later changing it again to Guitarmageddon, yeah. Robert Fleischman sang on all the songs that I played drums on. The songs I remember recording are Wild Child, Rocks on Fire, Euphoria, Get the Lead Out, New Kid, Shocker, Invincible, Full Shred, Young Blood, Ride the Serpent, Cock Teaser, Brain Sore. Vinnie was changing song titles and arrangements quite often, so it's hard to say anything for sure. So what's interesting too about some of the songs that he's just talked about there is that some of those songs are not on the list of songs that were potentially going to be on the Guitars from Hell album, but they do come up later on, and I'll talk about those songs just a bit later on, because they are songs that have recently, in fact, been mentioned by Vinnie Vincent on his Facebook page. And I think they do exist because I've heard snippets of them. But so this is the third album, and having heard these tracks, and I really like Euphoria. I love the tracks that he had for Euphoria. It really would have been very much a similar album to the first Vinnie Vincent Invasion album. Obviously, you've got the same vocalist, but even just the way Vinnie's playing, it's very similar to that first album. So why didn't it happen? Well, Robert Fleischman said one of the problems was that Vinnie, being the kind of person that Vinnie sometimes is, although he had this deal with Enigma, and I'm assuming Enigma were basically funding him to make this album and record this album, he was shopping their demos to other labels, even though he was being backed by Enigma Records. So they heard this and they were like not very happy, and they dropped him. That's what Robert Fleischman has said. That's something you shouldn't do if you're with a record company and they're expecting you to produce this album for them, and then what you are producing, you're then looking to sell to another record company. It's kind of not cool. So anyway, but of course, Vinnie being Vinnie, he still gets the recordings, takes off with them. They don't see the light of day. And, 4 of those songs do end up on the Euphoria EP that comes out. And I have a feeling that Euphoria EP, although it comes out in mid-90s, it may just be from these recordings that happened in 89 to 92. I mean, has Vinnie Vincent actually really recorded anything post-1992? Well, possibly. And this is where those songs, although, it's hard to know because Andre's saying he only did the drums between 89 and 92. So there's nothing post-1992. But he's talking about these other songs that, Cock Teaser, Brain Sore, Ride the Serpent, that he also played on that aren't on those songs that were potentially for Guitars from Hell. Maybe, this is where the drum machine comes in later on, because there are these songs that aren't on Guitars from Hell are then listed as being a potential album to come out later on. So let's just keep going with the timeline. So that's the situation that happened in 1992, roughly. And, Enigma Records, I think itself weren't probably in a great position either. And, you've got to think about the timing with the way the music industry is. It's kind of not surprising an album that sounds like Vinnie Vincent Invasion's first album isn't really going to get released in 1992. So Vinnie's very quiet for a while, though, of course, having some success, I guess, with writing for Kiss. And, I think that didn't end well yet again, though. And I think, Kiss have learned their lesson after Revenge, because there were all these lawsuits, Vinnie wanting, money from Kiss, saying he's not getting paid his royalties. So I think they worked out, though he's great, great songwriter, he's just not worth the hassle. So they didn't want to work with him again. And of course, Kiss are then going off and doing the, reunion tour. So I guess, because there was some sort of talk that maybe Vinnie would even get back in the band. But of course, that didn't happen. And he would have known that wasn't going to happen once the reunion happened. So I guess it makes sense around mid-90s, 96, he puts out this 4-track EP. But this 4-track EP is supposed to be a teaser for what is going to be Guitar-mageddon. Guitar-mageddon, very difficult to say, but I think that's how you say it. Guitar-mageddon, and it's going to have some of these songs that I've talked about from Guitars from Hell, but it's also going to have some of these other songs as well. Some of these songs that Andre talked about. So let's have a look at the track listing for Guitar-mageddon. So Guitar-mageddon release date, well, it was cancelled, but originally it was planned as a late 1996 release. And it says here that, these original recordings were either 89 to 92 or 96 to 97. I think a lot of these 89 to 92s would have been the Guitars from Hell sessions. And then maybe 96 to 97, I don't know too much about that. Did Robert Fleischman come in and do some more vocals? Or are these old vocals that he's then just, adding different music to, or adding new music on top of it, or just re-recording? My understanding is, of course, too, like I said, he was using drum machines, I think, at this point. But you have got the 4 tracks from the Euphoria EP, which, are fantastic songs. That's a great EP. But then you've got these songs: Shocker, Brainsore, Heavy Metal Poontang, Ride the Serpent, and Cock Teaser. And Vinnie Vincent, at around this time when Guitar-mageddon was supposed to be coming out, he was doing some Kiss expos, and he was talking about this album coming out, which it never did. He was, of course, talking about his new EP as well, the Euphoria EP. And he also had a merch page on the CD that came out. There was a merch card, so you could order things from him. Probably not a good idea, though, because he didn't have a good reputation of actually following through on anything you ordered, especially later on when he releases or announces the Vinnie Vincent Archives. So Vinnie Vincent Archives is a release that people paid money for. It was supposed to be, interestingly, weirdly enough, I think it was supposed to be 6 cassettes. And this is like, I don't know, 1998, late 90s sort of thing. I mean, cassettes are still a thing, but it's an unusual way to release material. But anyway, that's how it was packaged. And some people did pay money for it. And unfortunately, they got this, which isn't that useful. Anyway, and then basically after promising an album that never comes out and a archives, tape, 6 cassette package that, again, doesn't turn up, he kind of disappears. Now, some unfortunate things have happened in his personal life. I'm not really going to get into that too much, but unfortunately his wife, his ex-wife, I think it is, was murdered, and his wife after that, or his partner after that, ends up dying from alcohol abuse. So there's some sadness there definitely for him, and he also did get arrested at one point for him and his partner got into some disagreement, and then they found these dogs that perhaps weren't being looked after at his property. Not a good situation. And so, really from up until he reappeared, I think it was around 2018, He'd been pretty quiet since about 1998, so about 20 years really. You sort of hadn't really heard much from him other than these unfortunate stories that would come out in the media from time to time. Rolling Stones, I think around 2014, put out an article about him, and that's an interesting one if you want to check that one out. Again, it's quite old, it's 2014, but just profiling, I guess, Vinnie Vincent and really what had happened to him, and some of the unfortunate things that had happened. But yeah, he reappears, and it's, I guess since 2018, there's been some hope that, we're going to see some new Vinnie Vincent. But it really does, unfortunately, seem to be the same old Vinnie Vincent story of promising things, but then never really delivering. He performed with Robert Fleischman for the very first time. So even though Robert Fleischman has appeared on the first Vinnie Vincent album and recorded really a second album that's mainly unreleased, he never actually performed live with them until 2018. I think they did a couple of songs, nothing too much, but they did actually do a couple of songs together. And like I say, though, really since 2018, I follow him on Facebook, and there's been some bizarre posts and lots of different singers coming in and leaving, and lots of different promises and lots of non-appearances at conventions. So yeah, it's really not great. But it's a shame because, the songs I'm going to play you in just a minute are just, the unreleased songs are really good. And although, they're probably over 30 years old, they probably were the demos. They are really. They're the demos that came out and that were recorded in the late 80s, early 90s. But they would, it'd be great if those could be, tidied up a little bit and released. This is what Vinnie is promising. And actually, not even that long ago, there was this announcement on his Facebook. Vinnie Vincent Invasion, Judgment Day, Guitarmageddon, featuring Vinnie Vincent and Robert Fleischman. The limited edition collection, 1,000 units worldwide. Gatefold, photo book, poster, and more. If you order this, you are risking losing all your money. But I understand it sounds fantastic, but I'm just giving you a heads up there. And then this is here in a separate post, a sample of one of the songs is shared to get a preview of the new music with promise of more to come. Hey guys, I don't want to delay any longer since I know everyone is dying to hear something, so I'll be posting some short teasers this weekend. Second generation quality for expediency. There's a ton of them. In the next few weeks, I will post longer first generation videos to go with each teaser. So I have heard this. I've heard these snippets, and these go back to those songs that, haven't actually been officially released yet. So those songs that I talked about, like Ride the Serpent. I heard that on his Facebook. There was a snippet of that. Sounded great. But, again, it sounds very much like a lot of these unreleased songs that he did with Robert Fleischman, because it's Robert Fleischman on vocals. And I don't think Robert Fleischman has worked with Vinnie Vincent for a long time. So these must be old recordings, because he's had other guys come in and do vocals, right? And it hasn't worked out. And I think in the end, he's just gone back to these old vocals that he got done with Robert Fleischman, because it just, for whatever reason, didn't work out with all these other guys that he's been bringing in. So the vocals, I think, are not new recordings. And I don't know about what he's done with their music. But anyway, it sounded good, the snippets I heard, and I was going to play those snippets on the show, but just a day or two ago, suddenly his Facebook is no longer available, and you can't access it. I mean, there's an address and everything like that, but it just says you can't access this anymore at the moment. It's unavailable at the moment. So, who knows what's happening. It's a bit of a shame, because I was really hoping to play you some of these snippets, but for whatever reason, that is no longer available. But anyway, I will now finish the show today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. I'm a big Vinnie Vincent fan. My channel is called Rock and Metal Invasion for a reason, because it's named after Vinnie Vincent Invasion. But and I'm going to finish with I'm going to play you the 5 songs. These have been out for a while. You may have already heard these. They're available online. You can find them if you know where to look. But I'm just going to put them here, add them onto the tail end of this episode, which they're quite long songs. I'm not going to play the snippets. I'm going to play the whole lot. So I'm going to play you 5 songs, and those are the 5 songs that were not released that were supposed to be on the Guitars from Hell album. Okay, hope you enjoyed the songs. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll catch you later. Okay, see ya.
Ooh, you set my rocks, you set my rocks, you set my rocks.
Father, though we know not what we do. The universe is waiting for your touch, your light, your blessing. The children are waiting by the shores, staring in the sky, waiting, waiting, waiting for your light, your healing light.
Thank